John Billingsley, Phil Phlox. Join dozens of Star Trek celebrities for 8 hours of interviews, panels, performances, and general Trek wallow, all in support of the Hollywood Food Coalition, hofoco.org. Check us out, helping people in need for almost 40 years. Trek Talks 2 kicks off 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, January 14, 2023. Stay hep at trektalks.net. Live long and mark your calendars.
The Trek Geeks Podcast Network is proud to have Fansets as its presenting sponsor. Fansets is the place for amazing pin collectibles, with over 400 officially licensed Star Trek pins and new releases every month.
Stay tuned for a special discount code good on your next order at fansets.com just for Discovering Trek listeners. Fansets. Our pins have character.
A new mission, the return of a dangerous enemy, and a shocking resignation. Episode 9 of Lower Decks gives Captain Freeman the mission she's been campaigning for since Season 1, but when a reporter joins the crew to do a story on the Cali-class starship, she's concerned Mariner will mess things up and, well, it's Lower Decks, so you know it won't end well, and that's an understatement. Step into the turbo lift and hit that down button, folks. My name is Dan Davidson, and we are Discovering Trek, Lower Decks. Thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to Discovering Trek, the Star Trek Universe Companion, presented, as always, by Fansets. Episode 9 of Lower Decks Trusted Sources brings a news reporter on board to detail the first new swing-by mission of the Cerritos, and Captain Freeman really wants to show how great her ship and crew is. Problem is, she thinks Mariner's going to blow it for her. Yeah, way to go, Mom. And after visiting a planet that we haven't seen since TNG Season 1 and really didn't want or need to, things get real interesting on a different planet when a former enemy shows up and wreaks havoc on everyone's favorite Cali-class starship and crew. But as usual, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Before we get into too much detail about the penultimate episode of Season 3, I have to introduce my two amazing co-hosts. They really are the finest podcast crew in the quadrant, and I can't do this without them. As always, to help me break down this week's episode are my two good friends, Bill Smith and Casey Shafsky. Well, Bill, Lower Decks always has amazing callbacks that surprise us, and this week we got to go back to the drug planet from TNG, so yay?
Yay. This is an episode of TNG that I love. Thanks for the intro, Dan. And it's kind of cool to go back there after all this time. Especially in Lower Decks, because we can kind of be cheeky about it, and that makes me happy.
Yes, we'll get into that, I'm sure. And Casey, on top of everything else that happens this week, we actually see Freeman put Dr. Greenbird, or Dr. Miglimo, in charge of the Cerritos. So just another normal week for our favorite California class.
Hey, doctors should always captain starships. Always.
Yeah, we know what happens with that, right, Troy? Anyway. It's going to be a great conversation, and I am really looking forward to it. But before we start our discussion...
Black alert. Black alert.
This episode of Discovering Trek Lower Decks does contain spoilers. So if you haven't watched Star Trek Lower Decks Episode 9, stop listening right now. Go on over to Paramount Plus, watch the episode, then head back on over to Discovering Trek. Failure to do that puts you at risk to find out plot developments and character details for trusted sources. So guys, second to last episode of the season. This season has been fantastic so far. Let's start out with our thumbs up or thumbs down, as we have done for most of the season. I'm going to give it a thumbs up. I thought it was fantastic. I really liked it. There were some fun parts, there were some serious parts, there were some surprises, and some callbacks to great Trek, which we always love. So thumbs up for me. Casey, what about you, bud?
Thumbs up, my friend. You know, they always know how to have a strong ending or close to ending of a season. Loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bill, I think we're going to be going 3 for 3.
We are 3 for 3. Thumbs up, definitely. I like the premise of this episode. I like how it sets Captain Freeman on some uncertain footing. And I like that there's some real tension between her and Beckett. Plus, like Casey says, you know, they get really strong toward the end of a season, and that tells me a lot about what we can expect in the one episode to come later in the season.
Yeah, every season finale of Lower Decks so far has certainly not disappointed. So we'll see what happens with that next week. One of the things I liked about this, guys, is that this was a good episode about trust and the lack of it shown to Mariner. I was really unhappy with how Ransom reacted to everything that was going on, and even more so with Jennifer and even Boimler to a point. Everybody, of course, they have this close relationship, and then all of a sudden, at the first sign of trouble, everybody points a finger at Mariner. I know she has the reputation, but that kind of made me feel kind of bad, Bill. I'm not sure if you felt the same, but I felt bad for the girl.
If you'd like, I can hug you.
I didn't feel that bad.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a credit to the way this script is crafted. They wanted you to believe that it was Mariner. And because it's in character for her. I mean, whether or not she'd go to that length to torpedo her own mom is debatable, but it's plausible. And I think that's why that element of the story works. This is something that really painted the Cerritos in a bad light. And I think that's why people react so viscerally, honestly.
Casey, do you think it's normal for what we're seeing with Lower Decks and for the California class that they have such a bad reputation when they really have they do a fantastic job at just about everything they've done?
Yeah, the reputation seems a little out of place with all the accomplishments that are going on with the Cerritos. We don't know everything that's happening with the other Cali class ships. But, part of that, you kind of go, well, if there's this reputation, but then, hey, you do a good thing, and you do a good thing, and you do a good thing. And where it's a pattern, it's not a one-off, where they're having success after success. Then at some point, really, unless people are just burying their heads in the sand, the reputation has to change. Because then it's no longer your credit as a captain on some other type of ship, where if you go, the Kelly class ships aren't doing anything, then you've lost credibility if anybody looks up the accomplishments that the Cerritos crew have done.
Yeah. Bill, do you think that it's part of the issue of that question that I posed to Casey is we get to see the lower deckers, but all of the things that the Cerritos and the California class have done. Let's look at an example for the end of season 1, where they save the day. And they've done some pretty huge things over the course of 3 seasons. Do you think that I'm looking through it through a lens of that the lower decks people always seem to be the ones that get the bum end of the deal, and maybe that's why that reputation is out there? Or do you think it's a valid reputation because California class isn't the Enterprise, it isn't Galaxy class, it isn't Sovereign class, it's just California class?
I think it's the latter. I think it's because it's California class. I think we have a perception because we see, behind the curtain, in Oz. We understand why things are the way they are. And we know that these Starfleet officers on this ship are just as brave and valiant as the ones serving on the USS Enterprise. Mm-hmm. We see that in the whole Breen attack storyline. Ransom doesn't shy away from anything. He's right there in it. And same with Freeman. They act like Starfleet officers. So I think it's the Cali class that gets a bad rap because it's second contact. It's not, it's not, it's not a status job.
Yeah. And on top of second contact, now it's swing by, which I like how one of the things that I've liked what the writers have done with Lower Decks is they've had a lot of continuity. The continuity, whether it's from 25 years ago with episodes that we saw in the original series or in TNG or Deep Space Nine, or what we saw in season 1, where she started talking about this idea of Operation Swing By. She finally gets it. She's very nervous and, it's going to be awesome, but we're going to give you a reporter. And when has a reporter on a starship ever gone wrong? Let's just ask Captain Harriman of the Enterprise B, shall we? I mean, Casey, that was something that you knew right from the get-go. Having somebody from the FNN on was going to go bad, and it certainly didn't disappoint.
Anytime editing is controlled by someone else, you never know what the outcome is going to be, and usually the outcome for certain things, on news, to sell commercials, the goal is to make you dissatisfied with your current situation. So you think, oh, if I buy this thing that they're advertising, I'll feel better about what's going on. So once again, not shocked that the reporter did the reporter type of inside edition / job that just crushed that ship.
Bill, I want to get your... yeah, go ahead.
It really was an inside edition type piece too, Case. You nail it with that description. I was, for the life of me earlier, I was trying to figure out what show it resembled, and that or A Current Affair come right to mind.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that kind of gotcha journalism. And like you said, it just, journalists on starships never work out all that well.
We've seen some great voice guest actors this season in Lower Decks in season 3. It would have been awesome if they somehow would have gotten James Earl Jones to come in and do the CNN thing by going, "This is FNN, the Federation News Network." That would have been I would have been dying. That would have been fantastic. But we did see, I kind of saw it coming what was going to happen. And I think, Bill, you alluded to this a few minutes ago where she wants to interview the crew. So we know that that's going to be a problem. And everybody seems really excited about it. They're going to talk about what they love so much. And then Mariner goes in, and then all the wheels fall off the cart. And there's all this huge problem. And as we find out, Mariner's not the problem. Everybody's just having great conversations and talks about things that aren't necessarily an issue to them, but make the California class look bad. And that's part of that whole reputation problem.
Well, it goes back to context, right? You know, when Freeman and Ransom confront Mariner, they say that she went in and said all these things out of context, so it made them look bad. And that's really what the other stories were. You know, some of these other people like Kayshawn and some of the other crew members relayed some of these stories that they were involved in or that mattered to them. And to the reporter, it looked absolutely silly. So, I mean, getting turned into a hand puppet, that might seem silly to somebody. I get it. Maybe as silly as being held by a giant green hand in space. Who knows? But, you know, without proper context, it tells us that really anything can be misconstrued or blown out of proportion, as it was with this reporter.
Casey, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, come on now. This once again, it goes right back to a reporter trying to build instant trust with people and to get them to loosen up and to get juicy things that they may not think are juicy and or whatever, and fulfills what the agenda or hidden agenda of that reporter is. So it can just be, you know, you get people talking, and the longer and longer, certain stuff will come out where you go, oh yeah, I could cut that right there. And there's the little sound bite that'll work, that you can manipulate it any way you want to. And it may have nothing to do at all of how the situation actually was.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Speaking of juicy, because you used the term juicy a second ago,
Oh, no.
Starbase 80. Let's talk about Starbase 80. We finally get to see, kind of, though we see the two people show up in the little mini shuttle. Do we really think that there's any place in Starfleet that is that disgusting?
Do we really think there's any place in Starfleet that's run by 80s stoners?
Hey, Bill and Ted had to get a job somewhere.
They really did. I have a hard time believing that even some kind of starbase on the edge of the frontier is someplace where rejects go, because Starfleet is not about that. I mean, they even found a place for Reg Barkley on the Enterprise or at Starfleet Academy. If he can find a spot, I have to believe that someplace like Starbase 80 probably wouldn't exist.
Yeah, it was kind of gross, Casey. I'm not going to lie. And what did it smell like? It smelled like sweat and something else. I forget what it was, but it was a pretty funny line. Ew.
Ew all around. When your shuttle comes in and it's greasy, I'm like, guess what? No.
Elbow grease.
Yeah. Not that elbow grease. I was like, no, thank you.
Well, one of the things that I found very interesting, actually, before I get to this, I got one other question. Were either of you surprised by the resignation of Beckett at the end of this episode? Do you really did we think that she was going to stay at Starbase 80, or was she just going to say that's it? Now, before you answer that, I will say I can't imagine it's going to be long. I don't know if we're going to have to wait till next season for her to come back, or if it's going to be next week. But I can't imagine that it's going to be a permanent thing. But were you surprised, Bill, that we saw her take this step?
I was a little bit shocked. Not entirely. I mean, I wasn't like, jaw dropping, but I thought they might be able to get some interesting storylines out of the Starbase 80 thing. Because I mean, they teased it so early in the season.
Right.
If it's a place that's that dreaded, let's see why it's that dreaded. The only thing I didn't like about her leaving Starfleet is that she hooked up with that treasure hunter from Career Day. That just doesn't work for me. That's not a development I dig, no pun intended.
But that's a good pun. Absolutely. Go ahead, Casey.
Oh, man.
Please save us.
I wasn't surprised because I could see the Mariner character just going, F this. No, you're not dumping me off into the, like the worst summer camp, whatever type of thing that you want to. It's like, I have options. And, they made sure that we all knew in the audience that she had options earlier. Right. So it was kind of like, and part of it, like Bill, you're saying, I don't think they could show it to us because the whole aura of how awful this place is or how crappy it is, in our heads, we're all thinking certain things. And they'd see it and go, oh, okay, well, it's not that bad. And like you're saying, how can a Starbase really be that bad?
Yeah.
There's no way. So I wasn't surprised on it as like, okay, she was just, hey, peace out,
And did she actually, if I remember correctly, she did the Vulcan thing that she did in season 1 too, where she just was like, see ya, and she did that as she was walking away.
Yeah.
Good old Mariner. So I do have one thing I want to get to. We're going to talk about fan sets first before we do that. But when we get back, we're going to go back in time to TNG season 1.
Dan, as always, we want to take this moment to thank our friends at Fansets for being the presenting sponsor of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. They have been a core part of the entire network for years, and we are so proud of our relationship with them.
Yeah, we absolutely are, man. We met them in Vegas the first year they were in business, and right from the start, we knew that there was something very special about them. Lou, John, and the entire team at Fansets are truly wonderful people, and just like all of you, they're huge Star Trek fans. They love every part of the franchise, and that love and dedication goes into every single Star Trek pin they produce. And there are a lot of them. They have over 400 officially licensed Star Trek pins, and they have new releases every single month. And as a sponsor of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network, we get to give away Fanset stuff all the time, so you definitely want to keep your ears open for any new announcements where you can win some awesome Star Trek pins.
So friends, head on over to fansets.com, check out their amazing inventory of not only Star Trek pins, but also some other awesome genres, and put a bunch of pins in your cart. And maybe even some accessories like those incredible locking backs to keep your pins secure, or hey, maybe even an amazing gift certificate for a friend or a podcast co-host. Then at checkout, be sure to enter the special discount code TrekGeeks for 10% off your entire order. That's Trek Geeks in all capital letters with no spaces. And don't forget, when you spend more than $30, you automatically get free shipping in the U.S.
Fansets. Our pins have character. And we thank our friends at Fansets for being the presenting sponsor of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. Okay, guys, so here we are. We're going to wrap up some of the discussion, some of the points that I had. And that's the return to Omara. That was... wow, that was completely unexpected. I didn't know, Bill, that you really liked the episode Symbiosis. I hate that episode. I do not like that episode at all. I've never liked it. The only thing I like about that episode is when the guy like electrocutes Riker and he's like, that's
absolutely.
That's that part I like.
That's awesome because Frakes has this look on his face like he's just. You can't see it, in an audio podcast. But
that's pretty much the only part of that episode that I remember and like. But so I was really surprised, but also another great example of what this team is capable of. They pull stuff out that we would never think we would have seen ever again, and it works 100%. The whole storyline about the Enterprise leaving and what their society went through to get to the point that they are now with that mural, Casey.
A mural.
I want that mural in my room at home because that was really something.
Perhaps you can set it up behind the skulls from Star Trek Picard when they make those available.
I like that idea too. Yeah.
I love that we got a chance to go back to Ornara. At the end of Symbiosis, Picard essentially leaves these people high and dry.
He does.
And rightfully so, in a way. I mean, from their perspective, it's not. But from our perspective, it's like, aha, he gotcha. He obeyed the Prime Directive and he found a way to get them off the junk. I like the fact that we went back and revisited what happened to these people. And then to find out they just got addicted to fitness was hilarious.
That was pretty good. And Ransom certainly liked that.
Oh, yeah.
Were you a fan of them returning to that planet? Actually, Casey, let me ask you this. Are you a fan of the original TNG episode, Symbiosis?
No.
You
Negative.
guys know what you're missing.
I know exactly what I'm missing. And I'm glad you love it and enjoy it.
Yes.
But nunca for me.
The best part about Symbiosis is that you get 2 guest actors from Wrath of Khan
You do.
back in Star
You
Trek in
do.
the same episode.
You do.
You do.
Yeah.
That's just
I
so
found
awesome.
the best part of
Doesn't
that
save it.
episode was the ending credits.
Ooh. I hear the music's pretty good.
For TNG the motion picture they used in the end credits.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
What a great coincidence.
So we see what's going on with Omara. Pretty awesome. Okay, things are good. That mural is still awesome. I still want that mural in my house. So they decide to go see what's going on Brekka, the neighboring planet. This was the part that I absolutely loved. I was so happy to see the Breen back, or the guy from Return of the Jedi, however you want to look at it. But
Princess Leia?
Princess Leia. Yeah, it was great to see the Breen and their weird starships. Fantastic callback to DS9. They're still a pretty big nemesis, no pun intended, to other Star Trek movies. But it was good to see, and they worked it into the story really well, Casey.
They're a great villain. When you can't understand a thing that the villain's saying, it's like what is the motivation? And it's like these creatures are just terror. They're coming at you, and there seems to be no reasoning, none whatsoever. So yeah, very nice to. That was a great surprise. Wasn't expecting them.
Bill?
I agree 100%. At first I wondered what happened to the people on Brekka. I'm like, did we stumble into something bigger, like some kind of catastrophic event? Did the disruption of this drug trade kill everybody on the planet? And then to find out that it was a Breen surprise attack was even cooler, if I can use that word, because we haven't seen them in so long. And then you get that energy dampening weapon, and it's like, oh, ho, ho.
Great continuity there. They still have that weapon, and it causes lots of problems until someone comes to the rescue in the form of the automated ship. I can't remember the name of it right now. I apologize. But when has a sentient computer ever been a good thing? Maybe we should ask Dr. Daystrom. I don't know. I'm just asking, but I've got a real bad feeling about this. It was great. It came in, swooped, and saved the day, but I'm never a big fan of fully automated AI, buddy.
Look how well it worked out in TOS. And look how well it worked out really any other time the computer's been in charge. Even in TNG, I mean, when people kind of co-opt the computer to take control of the ship, it's not cool. So I have a feeling there's a lot more to this. And this isn't the last we've seen of that Texas class. No, not by a long shot.
Yeah. I like the idea of what the Admiral's trying to do. You want to save lives, but isn't the whole idea of Starfleet exploration? That's the whole reason why they are in existence. They're not. Bill and I talked about this on Trek Geeks this week. They're a semi-militaristic organization, even though their prime directive, no pun intended again, is exploration. So it's kind of a slap in the face that an admiral of this stature would be doing this for the good of protecting lives, when the whole idea of our lives is to go out and explore more, Casey.
Well, yeah,
not explore more Casey, but explore more comma.
Well,
maybe they're going to want
to. Hello there. Well, part of it, think about it. If you're somewhere, if you were in a continent here on our planet, and someone came by, first contact does that, and then X amount of time later, something comes where there's no person you're dealing with, it's like just cold and clinical. And I was like, how is that relationship building for any civilization? And that just, you're taking the humanity out of everything.
Yeah. How is an automated drone ship going to make first contact?
Yeah.
You know, how is it going to make second contact? I mean, how is it going to address the needs of a Federation member world? Or how's it going to negotiate a treaty? It just, it can't do those things.
Nobody to beam down. So I mean, it doesn't make sense. And I mean, you can go back to TOS with Landru and the Apple, all of these things that have computers running things. It always goes bad. And for someone who's an admiral in Starfleet to think, okay, I'm going to design a starship that's fully automated because nothing has ever gone wrong in the history of Starfleet or any of our exploration, I'm sure it's going to be great. I got a bad feeling about this, as another franchise is fond of saying from time to time.
As you should. We've seen it all too often. I have the same bad feeling.
And Casey, I know, I can tell by the look on your face, you got a bad feeling too.
It shall not end well.
Let me ask you this, guys. One other thing I wanted to ask is, we have seen in the 3 seasons of Lower Deck that we've watched so far, we've seen a lot of times where the Lower Deck crew is talking about this certain mission from Picard or what happened on Deep Space Nine and this, that, and the other thing. They know all this stuff. Wouldn't you think that some of this stuff would have been classified by Starfleet Command, but they seem to know an awful lot, like the Breen and the energy dampening weapons and stuff like that. They seem to have an idea of what was going on and were able to come up with a way to defend the ship when they were being attacked by a race and a species that really hasn't been seen since the Dominion War, and they didn't even know a lot about them before then.
I think it's kind of the opposite. I don't think it would be classified, especially since it goes to, being able to defend a Starfleet vessel. All these ships make logs, and they're all, I want to say publicly available, but they're available to pretty much anybody in Starfleet, as we've learned through in Next Gen, because they can call up somebody's log on a different starbase and go through it. So I have to believe that some of that data is there, and some of these lower deckers are big time nerds.
Oh, yeah, we've seen that with Boimler, actually. So,
yeah, absolutely.
That makes total sense. What else you got, guys, for this episode? There was a lot going in on this episode, or a lot going on in this episode. It wore me out, quite frankly.
I have 2 things. The first of which is, I love that the emblem on the reporter's pin kind of looks like the CBS logo. That always makes me happy when we see a callback, whether it's, in the bad computer storage in Okinawa, or in this case. But really the burning question of this episode, and something we haven't brought up yet, is how have we never seen a de-replicating trash can before in Star Trek? We see it here at the pie eating contest in the lounge. They're just taking the pies, zipping them into this trash can that essentially turns the pies back into energy. I want this more than I want a transporter, quite honestly.
Speaking of pies, am I the only one that thought of Breaking Bad with that whole pie eating contest thing? Okay, good, because that's a classic moment from Breaking Bad with the pie eating contest, and that's initially what I started thinking about. And I gotta say, Marina's kind of a bad pie eater if she's got that blueberry all over her uniform for so long into the episode.
Well, yes, but also, have you ever seen Stand By Me in the pie eating contest there?
Oh yeah,
it was so long ago since the scene, I don't remember it. Yeah,
it's
been a long time.
Sometimes pie eating contests are rigorous and aren't always everything that can stay into the system. And it's like, hey, that's how it goes. And if you get it on your hands and your shoes, whatever.
I only wish that, to complete the circle back to Breaking Bad, it had been a Tulaberry pie.
Oh, yes.
Not a blueberry pie.
That would have been really good.
That would have been the best wink and a nod back to a non-canon source ever. And I really can't fault it for that, because, I love blueberry pie, but Tulaberry would have just been the icing on the cake.
Yes, it would have. So Casey, what else? You got anything before we wrap up about things that stood out for you? I know we've talked a lot about different things this whole conversation.
Captain Carol being Carol, yelling is quite intimidating.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was like, yeah, if I'm a crew member on that, it's like, okay, she's pissed. Let's go. Here we go. I will do whatever work I need to do as far away from her as possible to have her happy about what's going on.
Yeah. You don't get a lot of yelling captains in Star Trek. Shut off that damn noise. That's about really the only other one I can think of.
Hey, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
No.
Well, because their job is to be in command, right?
Well, that's
I
true.
think that
Yep.
I think that Freeman, yells because she really feels betrayed, honestly, and it's disheartening to hear her have that reaction to Mariner that she does, because it's her daughter. Especially when she says, "I don't even know if I can call you my daughter anymore." I'm like, my heart sunk a little bit, because it was a blatant overreaction on her part,
yes.
but it was coming from some place that was just a deep wound.
And she didn't have the information to make that comment. She was assuming, and
Everyone assumed.
Everyone assumes, but I'll go back to what Bill just said. She's a captain. She's not.
Yep.
She needs to do a better job. But you're right. She's very, very, very intimidating.
Well,
so
if you have, someone that you've given birth to on your crew, that's got to be incredibly hard. I went to high school where our homeroom teacher was the father of one of the guys in that homeroom, and I was like, I couldn't believe how it would be for both of them for 4 years of like, this isn't just your teacher, this is your parent, and then you're the kid, and like, how do you be yourself when your parent is there 24/7?
Well, I guess we're going to find out what happens. A great episode 9 to season 3 of Lower Decks. So that means there's only one left, Casey. So what do we have coming up? I know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm the bearer of bad news. But what do we have coming up next week, pal?
Man, well, Dan, since it's the only one left next week, the Cerritos crew fights for California-class survival in a race to beat an automated starship from taking over second contact duty. It's the season 3 finale. Oh, man. The Stars at Night, and we'll be right here to talk all about it next week. Until then, y'all, remember that you can subscribe to Discovering Trek by searching for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or by downloading the Trek Geeks Podcast Network app.
And don't forget, you can support Discovering Trek and the Trek Geeks Podcast Network by subscribing to bonus content on Patreon. Get access to the unedited audio of all our podcasts and a whole bunch of other perks.
We want to take a moment to recognize the following amazing producers of Discovering Trek. We are truly so grateful for their support. Mike Bovia, Steve Bovia, Chaz Bradshaw, Kyle Castillo, Peter Craig, Andy Davenport, Craig Ewing, Jackie and Chris Hackney, Kimberly Hartman, David Hood, Lionel Marchand, Matt McGonigal, Darren Metcalf, Charlie Mulvey, Sean O'Halloran, Casey Pettit, Jamie Rogers, Major Self, Casey Shafsky, Jerry Shull, Jim Stoffel, Chris Trabuzio, Ken Tripp, Christina Werther, and the lovely and talented Jess Vashon. The senior producer of Trek Geeks is the Jude Tatman.
Hey, Jude. And for everybody, if you would like to support Discovering Trek and the Trek Geeks Podcast Network, beam on over to patreon.com/TrekGeeks, where subscription levels start at a mere $2 a month.
Next week's episode is The Stars at Night, and I keep wanting to say, are big and bright. Deep in the heart of Texas. Yeah, all I can see is Dale Evans singing it with the Muppets on The Muppet Show.
You're fired.
Okay, so for more great Star Trek discussion, please do check out the other member podcasts of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. So many great shows produced by passionate fans who just want to share their love of Star Trek and Gene's vision. You can find all our podcasts, including where to listen, by visiting trekgeeks.com/listen. The Trek Geeks Podcast Network, no one, dare I say no one, not a soul, talks Trek like we do.
Well, everybody, we want to thank you for joining us on our discussion for Lower Decks Episode 9, Trusted Sources. How long will we see Mariner not in a Starfleet uniform? With only one episode left in the season, I for one hope we don't have to wait until Season 4 to find out. As always, I need to give a huge shout out to my two cohorts, Bill and Casey. Guys, another fantastic and fun discussion of an episode that really was just fantastic. Thanks for all you do, guys. One more to go. And I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedule to listen to us talk all about Lower Decks Season 3. I'm looking forward to doing it all again next week with Star Trek Lower Decks Episode 10, The Stars at Night, deep in the heart of Texas. So until next week, never stop discovering
Texas.
Music for Discovering Trek is provided by 5 Year Mission. They're writing an original song for each episode of Star Trek. Hear more of their music at 5yearmission.net. Discovering Trek is a production of Coconut Media Works. Executive producers Bill Smith and Dan Davidson. For more great Star Trek discussion, discover the other shows of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network at trekgeeks.com or find us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
Coconut.